Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Tarks Inverted. Today we're going to talk about the reason that kind of led me to creating this channel, and that is I recently became a dad. At the point of recording this, my daughter is just over 5 months old, so I'm still very new to this whole fatherhood thing. But I thought I'd fill you in on what my journey has been like so far. So to start this journey, we're gonna go back quite a ways, a couple years actually, to when my wife and I decided it was time to actually start trying to have the baby. Unfortunately for us, it did take almost 3 years, which, you know, it's a long time, longer than average, but like long waits and attempts at pregnancy are not really an uncommon thing. So I don't really feel that much shame in putting this out there. And if there's anybody else there trying to have a baby and it's just not been working for what feels like quite a while, just keep going. You're not out, your cards aren't dealt, there's still a chance. But yeah, we did try for almost 3 years. As we were coming up on the 3-year mark, like more like 2 years and 9 months or so, I had come home from work one day as sick as I think I've ever been in my entire life. For almost a week, I had been like coughing up blood, and it wasn't exactly small amounts. But yeah, I come home from work and I just hunch myself over the kitchen counter, coughing into the sink. My back is hurting, all the muscles have been pulled from this intense coughing. My head is just swimming, my nose is running. Literally the worst I've ever been. And at the back of my head, my wife says, "We don't need to try anymore." And I was in no state to start jumping for joy. You know, some of the best news I've ever got at one of like the worst times I've ever felt. And I just kind of turn around like, this is how you're gonna tell me, in between me coughing up mouthfuls of blood into the sink. But the next few months went, you know, pretty routine. We had our regular checkups at the hospital. Everything was on track. The baby was growing at a normal rate, and we're coming up close to the due date. We're about 2 weeks out, and I'm leaving work. Literally right before I'm about to go out the door, my wife sends me a text. "Hey, I think we need to go to the hospital. The baby hasn't been moving as much the last day." Our baby, when she was in the womb, was very active, kicking, moving a lot, 360s, you know. She had a lot of fun in there, but for a little while she wasn't moving as much. So I rushed my way home safely, maybe a bit above the speed limit, but safely. I rushed my way home, pick up my wife, I rush us back to the hospital. They hook my wife up to a couple different machines, one for her heart rate and like another sort of thing to monitor the baby in her stomach. And they leave her hooked up to this, and I can see the graphs, you know, on the screen. Some of them are dipping, then there's a constant beep beep with the heart rate and stuff like that. And after a while of being hooked up to this, a doctor comes in the room and tells my wife and I what's going on, and she says, "Yeah, you've been having some contractions, not exactly like the normal you're ready for labor contractions, but she said you've been having some contractions. Some of them are lasting quite a long time, and unfortunately, in synchronicity with some of these contractions, the baby's heart rate was dropping, and they didn't know why. There's not really any way for them to figure that out, I guess." So what she had said next was, "I think we're going to try to induce labor tonight." She said, "We can't send you home and have this sort of thing continue, even if it's unlikely, you know, the worst will happen, but if it keeps happening, there's nothing we can do for you at home to save the baby, so it's for the best that, you know, she's full term now. We should just get her out." And then the doctor left, and it kind of hit us, like, we're not leaving this place until we have a baby. And it was surreal. It was like we knew it was coming, but yeah, that was it. That was the finish line. We were going to be induced for labor, which did not go according to plan. So they tried different methods over the next 36, 48 hours of inducing labor, and none of them would take. So the last method was to give my wife periodic doses of a certain drug that can kind of cause her body to create contractions. But every time they done this, when they got to certain dosages, they would notice the baby's heart rate dropping. So they had to stop the dose. Try it again, heart rate drops, stop the dose. The only option was a C-section, which we were trying to avoid, but there was no situation where it was worth risking not getting the C-section. So they tell us we're going in for a C-section that night. That was probably at 9 p.m. after 2 days in the hospital. The C-section didn't happen until 4 o'clock in the morning. So she gets wheeled into this operating room, big giant room, like 5 or 6 other doctors, anesthesiologists, people like that around. I get a seat at the head of her table. They put up this big sheet like right in front of her stomach, so I don't have to see them cutting her open. They drug her up and they just kind of get to work. This is probably where like the worst part of the story happens, at least in terms of I'm gonna call it ineptitude of staff. So I'm a really patient person with a lot of things, and I was really patient during this because not being patient wouldn't have got me anywhere. I kept my calm, but something happened that probably should have caused me to explode, and like I raged a little bit about today. But we're midway through the C-section. My wife is cut open. There's blood all over the floor. The doctors are doing these things, and my wife's on the table. Her arms are shaking because her nerves are going crazy, and she starts talking to me. She's like, hey, I feel like, you know, I have a knife stabbing me in the heart. And I just try to reassure him, like, okay, you know, we got an anesthesiologist here. He's probably got something for that. I'm sure he's getting right on it. Maybe a minute goes by, max, and she says it again. You know, I feel like I'm getting stabbed in the chest. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm sure the anesthesiologist is getting on it. And I look around and I see this behind me, okay? Sitting on a little stool, I see this guy just scrolling on his phone, just scrolling on what looks to be like Twitter or something. This is the anesthesiologist. I look at him, I'm like, hey, my wife is in pain. She's saying it feels like she's getting stabbed in the chest, and she's hoping you have something for that. And the guy looks up from his phone. Oh, what was that? What's going on? And he gets up, puts his phone in his pocket, and I have to explain it again. And at that point, you know, he's listening and paying attention, so he gets her something for it. But like, when my wife is like cut open on a table, they're trying to bring a new life into the world and make sure she's safe too. We're not exactly feeling like the most comfortable and reassured. Like, this is a bad time, and to see that kind of lack of professionalism, like, I honestly feel like that guy probably shouldn't have a job. You know, he had something he was supposed to be doing in that room and he wasn't. But he did, after, you know, being pulled off his phone, attend to her needs. And the baby got pulled out. They brought her around the curtain. She's crying. They showed us her. She's this little puffed up, swelled up little thing. And just the second she came out and we could hear her crying, it was overwhelming. It's like, so my wife and I both, like, you know, choked up a bit, shed a few tears, and they brought the baby around. Like, I took off my shirt, skin-to-skin contact for the baby, and just wrapped her around me. Obviously, like, my wife couldn't be there to do that. Her arms were, like, too shaky and stuff from all the painkillers and shit running through her body. And pretty soon after, we were wheeled out to go through all the other rigmarole of having a new baby. Like, the weighings, I'm just gonna call it feet bleeding, which was the most awful thing to sit through. Any needle we've had since has been fucking awful to sit through. But we were in the hospital for, I want to say, 2 or 3 days after that. They got her C-section stitched up. They come in to do periodic tests, you know, give her certain shots, drugs, vitamins, nutrients, stuff like that. I did go home at one point to make sure, you know, everything was set up for the baby when we got back home. You know, I basically lived in the hospital with the baby and the wife for the next couple days. Then we got discharged. We got home and things got worse. So within 2 hours of being home, my wife had come down from doing something upstairs, and she told me her bandage over her C-section had completely bled through. So something wasn't right. We immediately go back to the hospital. The nurses there, you know, they've seen this same sort of thing before, and they told us what's going on. So she had a hematoma. It's basically like deep flesh bruising, causes blood to pool and age a little bit, and then that pooled blood finds its way out through the incision. But what you do from here is to reopen the incision, drain out all that old blood as much as you can, clean it out, then put packing inside the wound, just cover it back up. And we were told that for the next 5 weeks, roughly, my wife was just gonna have to let the C-section wound heal from inside out. Now, I didn't see when the C-section happened, but I seen every step of this process, every gory little detail, and this whole thing honestly terrified me. My wife, who's now dealing with this post-operation complications, has a lessened degree of capability, things that she can do around home. So I was already expecting life to get really crazy and a lot more responsibilities with the new baby, but they just got even worse. Due to the limited amount of things that she could do, we ended up having to take everything that I set up for the baby at home, move it all onto the main floor in the living room, and we just lived in the living room for the next month. Every single day for about 5 weeks, we had to go to a clinic where the clinic would take off her bandages, take out the old packing, clean it up, put new packing in. And this stuff was like all completely new territory to me, and like I couldn't help but feel the worst. I had no sense of comfort in what was going to happen next. I didn't know if this was something that, you know, people die from or with regularity. So like, it was really hard not to, you know, focus on the negative. It was really hard to take this whole situation and just expect everything to work out, that it was all going to go, you know, perfectly, especially where almost nothing else had gone according to plan yet. And I think this all affected me a lot more than I realized. That added stress and the sort of trauma from just even seeing what my wife was going through and envisioning the future where I might be like a single dad, because I really had no idea. But like, for the next while, anytime my body would dare fall asleep, I would get like the worst nightmares. It would be the loudest noises. I don't even know what they were, just a bunch of sounds all playing at once, and I'd see all these images of like the worst things my brain could imagine playing out all in front of me all at the same time. And it would be like a second. It would be like a flash, this really loud, aggressive, violent flash in my dream the second I fall asleep, and I would wake up in a panic for a while anyway. It was at least a couple weeks of this before things started to look like, you know, the wound was closing up okay. We were avoiding infections. Everything was working out. But it was a really, really rough time. Thankfully, we didn't get infections. Everything healed up really cleanly. And I kept the stress load off her and just, you know, shouldered whatever burden there was and just took it. That was my job. There wasn't any... You know, I didn't have any choice in the matter. It is what it is, so I was gonna do what needed to be done. Now, I will add that, you know, in these early days with being so overwhelmed, like when I was holding the baby for the first time, that was extremely emotionally overwhelming. It was like, it's hard to, I don't exactly know how to explain it. It was like waves just kept crashing over me, and like, I couldn't help but like choke up seeing this little nugget in my hands. Like, this is like my entire life in front of me. This is like my entire future, and like I was gonna be there for her. I was gonna protect her and the family. That just kept hitting me in ways like I've never felt a sort of, I'll call it an emotional attack like that. But you know, over the next couple weeks, you can't really help but have some sort of like intrusive thoughts, and these are more than likely like self-doubt related. The thought occurred to me once, and like, I don't know why it would come up, and I know I didn't even entertain it, but like, you know, what if this isn't what I expected, or what if this isn't what we really wanted? Because we had no way to tell what it was going to be like to raise a kid. We knew it's what we wanted, but like 2 months from now, 3 months from now, 5 years from now, like, what if this actually isn't what we wanted? The thought occurs to you in the same way like any sort of intrusive thought occurs to you, and kind of tell yourself, no, that's ridiculous, and you put it out of your mind. But it's always a little concerning that a thought like that pops up at all. It's almost beyond reason, but it happens. And I'll come back to that thought in just a minute to hopefully excuse it from anybody's mind. But the few months that followed that, like right up until today, it has been a little bit of a struggle, you know, abandoning old routines and falling into a new way of life. The things that I used to do and used to have time for, I just really don't have that kind of time for anymore. And like, if I try to take that time, it's not as comfortable to take. So like editing videos, if I disappear to the office for a couple hours to edit a video, I can't shake this feeling in the back of my mind that like I'm neglecting my wife and child right now just to do this. I know they don't think that, and like, I know I'm really not, and they're all fine down there, and I'm gonna be down there myself in a little bit. But it's really hard to shake that feeling. So getting stuff done in the way I used to get stuff done just hasn't really been happening, and I'm still trying to, you know, wiggle my way into a comfortable lifestyle where I can do that again, or just be comfortable with doing that sort of thing again. I've also taken to favoring like, you know, smaller gaming experiences, or watching some short TV shows instead of movies, or reading before bed. But there has been a lot of like milestones over this time too. You know, the baby, she's great. She sees me, she smiles at me, she laughs, makes funny noises, she farts without a care in the world. She likes to just grab my face, take my glasses, grab my beard, whatever. Like, she's getting the hang of a lot of things. She can really hold on to stuff now, and that's kind of exciting. And she's very clearly trying to roll over, but she's not quite there yet. And she's in between being able to sleep through the night, and in between bouts of teething already and getting angry about that. The whole process, honestly, of just having a baby so far has been great. It's stressful. Obviously, you lose a lot of sleep. I wouldn't trade it for anything. So I want to come back to that idea that, like, you know, what if this isn't what I wanted? A few weeks ago, actually, at this point, I was sitting on one end of the couch, and my wife was sitting on the other end of the couch with our baby. And I was just looking over at them, and a thought kind of struck me. A thought that, like, this was normal. That, like, everything I was seeing right then, everything I was feeling right then was normal. Even though, like, in the last few months, literally everything changed, part of me felt like nothing had changed at all. Looking at the baby over there, sitting with my wife, I had this weird feeling that, like, that she was, like, always there. That, you know, like, I had always known her. And maybe we just, I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. But it just feels like she was always there. Nothing was out of place, nothing was unusual, nothing even really felt new. And at this point, and I guess at any point, since it seems like she was always there to me, I couldn't imagine my life without her.